My mom gave my fiance's parents $90K. They mocked her at my rehearsal dinner in front of 80 people. I canceled the wedding and found out they stole my mother's locket. I'm 33 years old. I work in financial consulting. And 3 weeks ago, I called off my wedding, literally at the rehearsal dinner, in front of like 80 people. And honestly, I don't regret it one bit. I know it sounds dramatic, like something that only happens in bad movies. But I need to tell this story because I'm still processing everything that happened and because, well, basically my ex-mother-in-law and ex-father-in-law made fun of my dead mom in front of half the world, and my fiancé did absolutely nothing to defend her. And when I say they made fun of her, I'm not exaggerating. I mean, it was one of the cruelest things I've ever heard in my life. I guess I should start from the beginning. I met Jennifer like 6.5 years ago, I think, at a work conference in San Diego. She worked in marketing for a tech company, and I had just started in consulting, and we connected immediately. You know, those conversations that flow naturally, and you end up talking until 3 in the provider, morning at the hotel bar. We started dating seriously like 3 months after we met, and everything seemed perfect at first. I mean, she was funny, smart, ambitious, all those things you look for in someone. My mom, Dorothy, adored her from the first day she met her. And that meant a lot to me because my mom was literally my best friend, my confidant, the person who always supported me in everything. My mom died 2 years ago from pancreatic cancer, and honestly, not a single day goes by that I don't think about her. It was fast, like 6 months from diagnosis until she passed, and it was devastating for my whole family. My dad was destroyed, my sister too, and I basically functioned on autopilot for months. Jennifer was there throughout the whole process, or at least that's what I thought at the time. She came to the hospital, attended the funeral, helped me with the paperwork and all that, and I guess that's why I thought she understood how important my mom was to me. What you need to understand about my mom is that she was one of those people who literally gave everything for others, you know what I mean? We weren't millionaires or anything like that, but my dad had a good job as an engineer, and my mom had saved her whole life, and she was always generous with the people she loved. When she met Jennifer's family, she basically adopted them as part of our family, especially because Jennifer's parents, Richard and Susan, always seemed to be in some kind of financial crisis. Richard owns a restaurant, one of those kind of pretentious places where they charge $40 for a plate of pasta, and he was constantly complaining that business wasn't going well, that he needed this or that the economy was tough. My mom, being who she was, helped them. And when I say she helped them, I'm not talking about lending them $100 for gas. My mom co-signed a loan for $50,000 so Richard could renovate the restaurant's kitchen because his bank didn't want to give him credit. She literally put her name and credit history at risk for people she barely knew because Jennifer was important to me. And not only that, when the restaurant's industrial oven broke down like 2 years later, my mom gave them $15,000 in cash so they could buy a new one because, according to Richard, he couldn't afford to close the restaurant for even one day. My mom never asked them to pay her back that money, never charged them interest on the loan, nothing. Oh, and I forgot to mention she also paid for like 3 semesters of Matthew's college, Jennifer's older brother, when he was about to drop out because he couldn't afford tuition. I'm talking about like $25,000 additional dollars. Matthew didn't even finish his degree. He changed majors 3 times and eventually dropped out in his last year. But my mom never said anything negative about it, never asked him for the money back. She just said, "Education is important, and if I can help." Mom died, and obviously there was the funeral and all that horrible process. And I remember Richard and Susan came, brought flowers, said the appropriate things you say at a funeral, like "we're so sorry." She was a wonderful woman, blah blah blah. But looking back, I should have noticed there was something weird about the way they acted, like they were there out of obligation, more than genuine affection. My dad mentioned to me afterwards that Richard didn't even stay for the whole service, that he left early saying he had to get back to the restaurant. But I was so devastated at that moment that I didn't even process that. After my mom died, Jennifer and I continued with our relationship, and like a year later I proposed. Honestly, I'm not sure if it was the right decision or if I was just looking for some stability after losing my mom. But at the time it seemed natural. Jennifer said, yes. We got engaged, started planning the wedding, And this is where things started getting weird. I wanted the wedding to be something simple, meaningful, with a touch that honored my mom. Nothing over the top. Like I wanted to put a photo of her at the reception. Maybe mention her memory at some point during the ceremony. Things like that. But every time I brought up the topic, Jennifer kind of changed the conversation or said, I don't want the wedding to be sad. Andrew, we should focus on celebrating our future, not the past. And I was like, well, that makes sense. I don't want everyone crying at my wedding, so I let the topic go. But then came the menu planning, and I suggested we include my mom's favorite dish, some ricotta ravioli that she made amazingly. And Jennifer literally told me, your mom's not going to be there to eat them. Andrew, it doesn't make sense. And that hurt. Honestly. But I also didn't want to fight over food, so again I let the topic go. I should have seen the signs right there. You know what I mean? I should have realized something was wrong. Fast forward to, like 3 months before the wedding, and Richard and Susan offered to host the rehearsal dinner. They said they wanted to do it at this super fancy restaurant they knew, that it was going to be their gift to us, not to worry about anything. Jennifer was super excited about the idea, and I thought, well, it's a nice gesture, right? Her family wants to contribute to the celebration. My dad offered to pay half the costs, but Richard insisted no, that they had this covered, that it was their way of showing us how much they loved us. The guest list for the rehearsal dinner started growing and growing. I had assumed it was going to be something intimate, like 20 to 30 people max, close family, and the wedding party. But when Jennifer showed me the final list, there were like 80 names on there. I asked her, who are all these people? And she explained that her parents had invited several of their friends from the restaurant, some of Richard's business associates, some cousins I'd never met. Of the 80 guests, like 15 were from my side and the rest were from Jennifer's side. It seemed weird to me, but I also didn't want to be the difficult groom who complains about everything, so I said it was fine. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived and the restaurant was, I don't know how to describe it, pretentious. One of those places where there are more forks than you should need in your life, and the waiters look at you like you're a peasant if you don't know what wine to order. Richard had reserved the entire second floor of the restaurant, and when we got there, people were already everywhere. Music playing. Waiters passing around trays of canapes that probably cost $50 each. My dad and sister arrived, and I could see on their faces that they also felt uncomfortable with the whole spectacle. My sister pulled me aside at one point and told me, this feels more like a networking event for Richard than your rehearsal dinner. And I was like, I know, but we just have to survive. Tonight and tomorrow is our day. She looked at me like she wanted to say something else, but just nodded and said, okay, I'm here if you need me. Dinner started and everything seemed normal at first. The food was good, people were chatting, Jennifer looked beautiful in her blue dress, and I was trying to relax and enjoy the moment. But then it came time for speeches, and Richard stood up with his wine glass in his hand, and that kind of smile you only see on people who are about to say something they think is charming, but is really offensive. He started his speech saying normal things, like we're very excited about the wedding, Jennifer is our princess, blah blah blah. But then he started making comments about me that were, let's say, questionable. He said something like, when Jennifer introduced us to Andrew, I admit he wasn't exactly what we'd imagined for her, you know. Jennifer always had very successful suitors, men with their own businesses, with big ambitions. And I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell? Is he really saying this at my rehearsal dinner? He continued saying that. But Andrew has turned out to be a pleasant surprise. He's hardworking, he's dedicated, and although he doesn't come from a family with much pedigree, he's proven to be a good match for Jennifer. He used the word pedigree, literally, like we were talking about dogs. I could feel my face getting red, and I looked at Jennifer, expecting her to say something, to signal her dad to stop. But she was just sitting there, smiling like nothing was happening. But the worst, the absolutely worst, came after. Richard started talking about family and about how it's important for families to support each other, and then he said, you know, Andrew's mother, Dorothy, was a very generous woman. Maybe too generous. Always meddling in other people's business. Always wanting to be the center of attention. And Susan, his wife, laughed and added from her seat, Yes, Dorothy always had to be involved in everything, right? She could never just stay in her lane. I froze. I literally couldn't believe what I was hearing. These people. These people my mom had helped with tens of thousands of dollars, who she had financially rescued multiple times, were there making fun of her. 2 years after her death. At my rehearsal dinner, Richard continued. And I know she had good intentions, but sometimes she was a bit suffocating, right? Always with her opinions about how we should run the restaurant, how we should raise our children. My sister stood up from her chair. I could see she was about to explode, but I signaled her to wait. I stood up slowly, walked to where Richard was, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Can you repeat what you just said about my mother?" And he looked at me like I was the one being irrational and said, "Andrew, I'm just being honest. Your mother was very persistent, that's all." I told him, "My mother lent you $50,000 when no bank wanted to give you a cent, because they knew you were a risk. My mother gave you $15,000 in cash for your oven. My mother paid for your son's college who didn't even finish his degree. And you're here, at my rehearsal dinner, making fun of her memory." Susan tried to interrupt, saying, "We weren't making fun, honey. We were just being honest about her personality." But I cut her off and said, "Don't call me honey. I have no relationship with you beyond the fact that your daughter and I were going to get married." I looked at Jennifer, expecting her to finally say something, to defend my mom, to tell her parents they were crossing the line. But she was just sitting there with wide eyes, not saying anything. I said, "You're not going to say anything? You're going to let your parents talk about my mom like that?" And she mumbled something like, "Dad was just trying to lighten the mood. Andrew, don't take it so personally. Don't take it so personally." Those were her exact words, as if her parents insulting the memory of the woman who gave us life and who helped her family for years was just a joke I wasn't getting. In that moment, something in me broke. You know what I mean? Like the whole relationship suddenly looked different. All the times Jennifer had minimized my feelings about my mom, all the times she had put her family before me. I walked out of the restaurant without saying anything else. My dad and sister followed me, and outside in the parking lot, my sister hugged me and said, "You don't have to go back in there. You don't have to do this." My dad was crying, which he almost never does, and said, "Your mom didn't deserve that, and you don't deserve to be with people who treat her like that." We stood there for like 10 minutes, just breathing, trying to process what had happened. Then I made a decision. I went back into the restaurant, walked to the front where everyone was still sitting in an uncomfortable silence, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "The wedding isn't going to happen. Not tomorrow. Not ever. I'm not going to marry someone who allows her family to insult my dead mother, and I'm definitely not going to marry into a family that feels entitled to mock the woman who saved them from bankruptcy." Jennifer stood up and started crying, saying, "Andrew, you can't be serious." But I told her, "I've never been more serious in my life." Richard tried to say something like, "You're overreacting, son." But I interrupted him and said, "I'm not your son. Thank God, and this isn't an overreaction. This is me respecting my mother's memory more than you ever respected her when she was alive." I looked at all the guests who were sitting there in shock and said, "I'm sorry you had to witness this, especially those of you who came from far away, but I can't in good conscience get married tomorrow." Then I just turned around and left. This time for good. Sent me like 50 messages saying we could work this out, that her parents would apologize, that we couldn't throw away 6 years of relationship over one bad night. Susan left me voicemails crying, saying I had misunderstood everything, that they loved my mom like family. Richard sent me a text saying I was immature and embarrassing his family. Matthew, Jennifer's brother, sent me a message saying I was an idiot for canceling the wedding over something so stupid. I blocked everyone except Jennifer because I felt I at least owed her a final conversation. She showed up at my apartment the next day, without warning, with swollen eyes from crying so much. She begged me to reconsider, to talk to a therapist, to give her another chance. I asked her directly, "Why didn't you defend me? Why didn't you defend my mom?" And she said, "I didn't know what to say. Everything happened so fast. I was in shock." I told her, "Jennifer, your parents planned that speech. That wasn't a spontaneous comment. Richard literally wrote notes for that speech. You knew the kind of things they were going to say, and you didn't warn me. You didn't stop them. She tried to deny it, but I could see on her face it was true. I told her, I can't trust you. I can't spend the rest of my life with someone who won't defend what's important to me when things get tough. She stayed for like 2 hours trying to convince me, and when she finally accepted I wasn't going to change my mind, she got furious. She started yelling at me, saying I was being dramatic, that my mom wasn't perfect either, that she had her flaws too. I asked her to leave, and she walked out, slamming the door so hard that something in my apartment fell and broke. But the story doesn't end there. Like 3 days later, I was going through some of my mom's things I had stored in my closet. Photos, letters, jewelry, that kind of stuff. My mom had this antique locket that was my grandmother's, super valuable sentimentally, with photos of me and my sister when we were kids inside. I had kept that locket in a special box with other jewelry of my mom's, and when I went to look for it, it wasn't there. I panicked, basically tore apart my apartment looking for it. I called my dad asking if he had it, called my sister, nobody knew where it was. Then I remembered that Jennifer had been at my apartment several times in recent months while I was at work, and she knew where I kept my mom's things because she had helped me organize them after the funeral. I sent her a message asking her directly if she knew anything about the locket, and she didn't respond for hours. Finally, she answered saying, I borrowed it a few months ago. I wanted to feel connected to you and your family before the wedding. When I read that, I almost threw my phone against the wall. Borrowed. Without asking? One of the few things I had left from my mom. I told her I needed her to return it immediately, and she said she had it at her parents' house, that she could bring it to me the next day. I told her no, that I was going to go get it right now because I didn't trust that she would actually return it to me. I went to Richard and Susan's house that same night, knocked on the door, and Susan opened with a face that obviously didn't want to see me there. I told her I was coming for my mom's locket that Jennifer had taken without permission, and Susan tried to play dumb, saying, I don't know what you're talking about. I raised my voice and said, I know it's here. Jennifer confirmed it to me. And if you don't give it to me in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to call the police. Richard appeared behind Susan and said, You're being ridiculous. It's just a piece of jewelry. But I told him, it's not just jewelry. It's one of the last physical memories I have of my mother, and your daughter had no right to take it. Jennifer came down the stairs with the locket in her hand, finally, and gave it to me without saying anything. I checked it to make sure the photos were still inside, and thank God they were. I told them I never wanted to have contact with any of them ever again in my life, that they were going to stop calling me, texting me, showing up at my apartment. Richard tried to say something about how I was being immature and dramatic, but I was already walking out the door. It's been 3 weeks since all that. I blocked Jennifer on everything, blocked her parents, Matthew, everyone. I returned the wedding gifts we had received, canceled the venue, basically undid everything we had planned. I lost the deposit at several places because it was so last minute, but honestly, I don't care about the money. My dad told me he was proud of me for defending my mom's memory, that she would have done the same for us. My sister has been visiting often to make sure I'm okay. Do I feel bad about how everything happened? Yes and no. I feel bad because 6 years is a long time to invest in a relationship that ended like this because I thought Jennifer was someone different from who she really was. But I don't feel bad about my decision to cancel the wedding. Every time I think about how Richard and Susan talked about my mom, every time I remember Jennifer's face not defending either of us, I know I did the right thing. My mom taught me that you have to be generous, that you have to help people when they might need it. But she also taught me that you have to have dignity, that you have to defend yourself and the people you love. She dedicated years to helping that family, never asked for anything in return, and they repaid her with mockery and ingratitude. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life with people like that. I wasn't going to raise children with people like that. Period. I still have difficult days. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I wonder if I should have tried to save the relationship, if I should have given Jennifer another chance. But then I remember that she had multiple opportunities to do the right thing and chose not to. She chose her parents over me, chose her comfort over defending what was right. And that's not the person I want to spend my life with. My mom's locket is now in a safety deposit box at the bank because I don't trust leaving it in my apartment after everything that happened. Sometimes I take it out just to look at it, to remember my mom, to remember why I made the decision I made. And every time I do, I know she would agree with what I did, that she wouldn't have wanted me to marry someone who didn't value me, who didn't value the sacrifice she made for that family. I guess the lesson here, if there is one, is that you can't force people to be grateful. You can't force them to be decent. Richard and Susan are who they are, and Jennifer is who she is. I can't change that. The only thing I can control is how I respond, what I tolerate, who I choose to spend my life with. And I chose not to tolerate it. I chose to honor my mother's memory over a relationship that clearly it wasn't worth it. And honestly, 3 weeks later, I'm sleeping better than I have in months, knowing I made the right decision. That's enough for now.